YouTube channel called Goodness Gracious. If you're just tuning in, thank you so much. Like I'm sure so many other people, I am starting a vlog during this lovely quarantine that we're having. I hope that everybody is staying safe and healthy. So I love to bake. I've baked my entire life for as long as I can remember. And I also recently went to culinary school, so I actually studied pastry. And I'd love to share some great recipes with you, as well as some technique and some little tricks that I've learned over the years that have really helped me in the kitchen. So today, for my first recipe, I thought we would start with a delicious classic that everybody loves and is probably craving right now, and that is a ooey gooey delicious cocoa brownie. It's one of my favorite desserts. I'm a huge chocolate fan. Who isn't really? I don't understand those people. Yes, so I thought we would start with that with regards to brownies and what makes a really good brownie. There are so many different variations of recipes out there. It's like the standard chocolate chip cookie, but when you get a brownie recipe right, it is just mind-blowing, in my opinion. So I hope you feel the same way. This particular recipe is from Alton Brown. And it is a cocoa-based brownie. You'll see a lot of recipes out there that also have real chocolate, usually a semi-sweet or a dark. And those recipes, I'm sure there are some great ones out there, and sometimes a mixture of the two. For me, I really wanted to try a cocoa-based brownie mix with you today because based on my research, and what hopefully we'll find out today, there isn't nearly as much variation when it comes to baking a brownie mix with only cocoa powder. Because what you can do is you can actually modify the fat content very easily versus the cocoa, and then you get a very strong chocolatey cocoa flavor as well. Because there are so many different types of chocolate bars and semi-sweet chocolate out there that you can get, which you can also experiment with. There are some really great high quality ones. But I wanted to stick with the standard cocoa powder base to get a really fudgy, delicious chocolate brownie. So I've sifted all of my ingredients here. Something else that I really want to share with you is how I get my station set up. Because often when you see these vlogs or when you watch the Food Network, everything's already done. So magically, these little glass bowls appear and they look lovely and everything's already scaled and ready to go. And then people just kind of toss things into a bowl, mix it together, throw it in the oven, and it's done. That's not reality. We all have interesting pantries, hopefully more organized than mine. So I really do want to stress the importance of actually getting this set up before you start baking. Because often what happens in a recipe, you have to do things very quickly, depending on what you're making. And so you don't want to be rummaging through things that you haven't been in months and months at a time to try to find a certain ingredient, because it might actually throw off your recipe. You don't want that to happen. And it's just nice to be organized. So I have here some butter. This is a bit softened and we're actually gonna melt this soon. A great tip that I wanna share with you, if you don't already know, is you can use one of these, which is one of my favorite tools to keep in the kitchen. It's a dough cutter. You can also get plastic ones as well, and they are extremely helpful for certain things. But what I really like about these, when you're dealing with things like butter, or things that have like a consistency such as this, you can easily cut using this as well. Instead of say a butter knife, you could also use just a plain knife to do this, but if you're doing it on a surface that's not a cutting board, you can use one of these guys just fine. So that's a super handy dandy tool that I have. The butter is ready to go. It's just chopped into chunks. This is a cup of butter. So it's roughly a half of one of the blocks that you get at the grocery store. But it's incredibly important to be precise anytime you're baking, of course. So that's ready to go. We'll melt that down. We have 4 eggs here. We've got a cup of packed brown sugar. I use the Rogers variation that just says perfect brown sugar. It's kind of in between the light variation that you get and the really dark stuff. I also love the dark stuff, especially for things like, say, a ginger molasses cookie. It's perfect for that. But generally speaking, the one that's right in the middle is great for everyday baking. So that's there. It's going to give a nice richness to the brownie. Then we have your standard white sugar, more sweetness of course, 4 eggs. So that adds a lot of fat and also some structure too. It also, which you'll find out soon, actually acts as a leavening agent. In this recipe, you'll notice that there's no baking soda or baking powder in here, so we solely depend on the eggs to add a little bit of lift and air. You don't want too much though, because we want these to be super fudgy, not cakey. So you've got the eggs. This is a half a teaspoon of salt. I have some high quality vanilla extract. That's something that's also really important to keep in your pantry. A lot of people use the artificial stuff and it's super budget friendly, so that's fine. But honestly, I think that the investment is worth it for everything. So then we also have a sifted half a cup of flour. It's super low when you compare that to like a cake mix or anything really. And that's what we want, because we just want all of the rich, sweet deliciousness in this. The other thing that I have ready to go is a pan. You'll notice mine is round. Ideally, you have a square 8x8 pan at home that could do the trick perfectly fine. I do not, funny enough. I have a long rectangle one, so I'm gonna be using this 8-inch cake pan instead, which I have buttered thoroughly and then floured as well. If you need help in terms of like knowing how to flour a pan properly, that could actually be a tricky thing. Just let me know and I can tell you, because there is a trick to that. Okay, so that's it. The other thing that I've done, of course, is I've preheated the oven. So it'll beep in just a second. It's just heating up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty low. Again, you kind of want to just bake this so that it contains like that fudgy ooey gooiness. You don't want to over bake these at all. And so the lower temperature helps with that a little bit. So we're gonna get started. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna melt this butter down. The small chunks really help. Just in terms of heat distribution, it expands the actual butter surface, right? So when you're heating something up, it just goes a little bit faster and very evenly. But fortunately, we don't need to soften this. We're actually melting it down, and you want this butter to be hot. That's actually really important. The oven is now preheated. So we're gonna let that melt. Might need a couple more times in the microwave. And in the meantime, I'm grabbing my eggs. So I use free range, preferably organic eggs. It makes a difference as well. So similar to what I was saying about the real vanilla extract, investing in high quality eggs, it's better for your health too. And the flavor is just so much better as well. So that's why I like using these. I'm going over to my mixer. I have a standard KitchenAid mixer that I got for my birthday, I think, from my mom a while ago, and it is my best friend. Yes, and I just got this lovely, standard mixers will come with something like this, which is great. I've used this many times as well, but it's nice to have the glass variation because you can see in my butter. Just a second. Almost. I'm just gonna leave that in for a little bit longer. Yeah, the glass bowl is really nice because I'm pretty sure that's microwavable, which is ideal. It has a great spout for pouring, which is what we want for the brownies. And it also has a larger capacity too, so good for big recipe mixes and splashes too if you have something going. So I'm gonna go ahead and crack these. Watch me mess this up because this is my first time. Some people do this in a very fancy manner, and I am not one of those people. Just don't get any shell in your batter. Nobody wants that. Don't be afraid. And I am guilty of this. I really don't like the little white things that are on eggs. Those are actually just little pieces of white protein. They're nothing crazy. People think that there's something else, and they're not. So you don't have to worry about that. Usually the bigger the little white thing, I forget what the scientific name is. If anybody knows, please remind me. It actually means the fresher the egg. So fun tip. Okay. So this butter is fully melted and it's nice and hot to the touch, which is what you want. So I'm just gonna put this to the side. And I'm gonna start my eggs. Okay. These eggs are nicely whipped. They're ready when, again, there's a bit of a lighter color, and they've also expanded in volume, and you see lots of tiny, tiny bubbles. So that looks good. I'm now going to be adding both of the sugars, and then we're going to whip this up. Oh, something else I wanted to mention. These standard measuring cups are great. A lot of them are slightly inaccurate. I, of course, have them in my kitchen, as so many people do, and we often rely upon them. The problem is a lot of the recipes actually need to be a lot more accurate than this. It's interesting that this one actually does call for standard cups. So when that happens with brown sugar, it's really important to actually pack it. It says that sometimes when people are like, oh, whatever, it makes a difference. You get more sugar in there if you do that. So both sugars are in, and now, this will take a little bit of time too. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna whip this up, and this is when it starts to look extremely silky, so you'll notice a bit of a gloss when it's ready, and it'll still maintain quite a light color. It'll be a bit darker than your standard, what we call a sabayon in pastry world, so this is just a sugar and egg mixture. That's what it is. So the other variation of an egg and sugar mixture is a meringue. That's not what we're doing here today, and that only requires egg whites, as many of you probably know. So we'll do that later on, if all goes well with this channel. Yeah. So here's our sabayon. Again, you can beat this pretty hard. Not like a meringue. Don't do this to a meringue. Okay, so this is finally done. It's taken quite a bit of a whipping, but it's nice and silky and glossy. And what you'll notice, that when we say ribbony, it can mean a couple of different things. Often what I look for is I'll actually take the attachment off. Notice too, I'm of course using the whisk attachment because we're whipping eggs together. And you'll notice that it's not like super liquidy, but of course it's still falling quite easily into itself. So that's sort of what I look for. And I'm gonna bring it up closer as well so that you can see exactly what it looks like before we add any of the other ingredients. Don't waste any of that delicious egg and sugar. There we go, that's pretty good. You can use your fingers too. Of course, they're clean. Okay. So this is really hard. If you can see that, it looks pretty glossy, right? Glossy, well whipped, quite a bit of volume. So that is done, and now we're gonna add all of the other ingredients. I'm going to go ahead, oh, and I need a spatula. Spatulas like these, I really like this one. It's heat proof. Make sure you get a nice heat proof spatula or set of them. And it's silicone as well. They are your best friend. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and add the cocoa that I sifted earlier. This is 1.5 cups of cocoa, so it's quite a bit more than even the butter and the flour that we're putting in, because we want this to be chocolatey. And whenever I deal with a sabayon, I like to do a bit of a fold, which is something that I learned very recently in pastry school. It helps maintain a bit of the air. So you want a bit of that volume at this point. I'm just gonna fold till I get about, let's say like 1/3 of the cocoa powder mixed in. Then we'll add something else. We're gonna add the flour and salt. Salt the dry. Don't forget the salt. The salt's really important, especially since you're using unsalted butter in your baking. Now this is your hot melted stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna, as I'm folding, I'm also gonna add all of this. Probably shouldn't add it all at once, to be honest. Just folding it all together. You don't want to be beating this. That's why I took it off the mixer, and that's why I'm using a spatula. Because at this point, the eggs are all done. That's all the whipping you need to do. And you just want to maintain that delicious fudginess. This is not a cake. Some people like the brownies cakey, but I am definitely part of the fudgy club. Ideally, when these are all done, they'll come out as something that is super ooey gooey fudgy in the middle. And I love that beautiful glossy crackle that you can get on some good brownies. So fingers crossed. We will see. I actually haven't made these brownies in my oven yet. There we go. Okay, that is combined. So I'm now pouring this into my pan. Bring it over here. All right in there. Good. I'm just flattening it ever so slightly, but you really don't have to do much of that. Get all of it in there. I like to give it a bit of a tap. I like that girl. Get that air out of it. Now I am going to place these brownies right away into my preheated oven. Middle rack. Yeah, middle rack should be good. There we go. Okay, so the brownies are in the oven. I'm going to set my timer for 45 minutes. It's quite a low, slow bake. And you know what? Since this is a new oven and I have not yet tested this recipe in here, I'm gonna actually stick to 40, and then I can do a chop, because the worst thing you can do to a fudgy brownie is overbake before. At that time, what I'm gonna do is I will take out the brownies, test them, preferably with a toothpick. I don't think I have any of those right now, so I'll just probably use a butter knife. And a little bit of wetness is actually okay, not a lot, because you want it to be baked through. There's some raw eggs in there, but you do still want it to be ooey. And it's also important to remember that anytime you bake anything, there's a little bit of baking that actually happens once the item is out of the oven, because it's so hot and it's in a hot pan too. So you don't want to forget about that baking that happens afterwards. All right, so we have quite a bit of time on the oven. We will see you soon. I'm going to clean up. So it has now been actually about 55 minutes since I put my brownies in the oven. And then I did, obviously they're not hot anymore because I can pick this up. They have cooled a bit. They're still slightly warm, because what's better than a really nice warm brownie fresh out of the oven? And this is when I wanted to show you the big reveal of what has happened. So let's see if I can actually depan this properly. Whew. Okay, good, and it actually fits in the plate really nicely, which is nice. A nice little bonus. So you'll see there is a bit of damage on the top just from poking a knife in there just to check to see if it was done. But otherwise, I'm really happy with the way the top looks. I do have a slight crackle. It did take a bit longer than the recipe actually says. The recipe calls for 40 minutes. And that's very likely due to the fact that around 8-inch pan is definitely smaller than an 8x8 square pan. So it's a bit of a thicker brownie, which I'm actually kind of excited about. All right, so let's cut into this guy and we can see what's inside. I'm gonna cut this like a pie, because probably means that I'm getting a bigger brownie, and it is a circle after all. Just maybe a more reasonable size. There we go. Oh, I did that horribly. So a good trick, it is a brownie, so I'm not too fussed, but if I was cutting into a cake or a piece of pie, what I would want to do is make sure that every time I'm cutting in, I'm using a very clean knife. I did not do that, so my lines are extremely messy, but it's kind of a messy thing anyway, so I'm okay with it. Okay. Oh, there we go. That looks like a perfectly fudgy, delicious brownie. Now I'm gonna bring it up closer. Ta-da! See how it's gooey? And then on the top you see a nice bit of shine still, which is exactly what I was looking for. So I'm really happy with the look and the way that it's come out and the way that it's baked through as well. Sometimes you just get a bit of an ooey center that's undercooked completely, but this is ideal. So very happy with that. And now, need a fork. Actually, I'm just gonna pick it up with my hands. The taste test. That is a very fudgy, ooey gooey, extremely chocolatey brownie. So, yeah. I mean, it is still warm under the oven, so it's ideal right now. But I'm sure this will hold up based on the inside. So please, yeah, I highly recommend that you give these brownies a try. I'll post a link to the recipe. It's not mine, but I highly recommend this one for sure. Thank you so much again for watching my very first episode on Goodness Gracious. My name is Grace. Please try this brownie recipe. Let me know what you think of my video. I know there were some kinks that I've got to work out, but it is the first one. So yeah, and please let me know what you'd like to see in other episodes as well. Thanks.